And we are up and running. A beautiful day here in the heartland of America, good old America. And we're getting some really amazing weather considering how hot things are globally. Have you noticed that, Barrett? There are forest fires and records being broken all over the planet, places that you don't expect that extreme heat from, like even Los Angeles had a 117-degree day not long ago. And for LA, that is literally unheard of. So there is change afoot, but that's the nature of this world.
Yes, it is true. Yeah, I'm getting a little feedback here. Yeah, so yeah, it is a wild and wacky world, and it is nice that we're not experiencing the brunt of that heat so much. I mean, we've had some hot days, but for the last week of July here, getting sunny days in the mid to low 70s, that's pretty unusual. So I've even noticed that in general, not always, but in general over the last several years, while the world is burning, the Midwest seems to be fairly moderate, and I'm always like, oh, that's actually pretty nice. So, yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, and I guess it's going to just keep continuing, right? This is a world of shift and change. This is a world of ups and downs, including temperatures, and they're just going to keep going up, up, higher, and maybe down, down in the winter, and we'll just have to keep navigating all that.
Yes, and there is also the melting ice caps and glaciers all around the planet. So if you have beachfront property, you may be in for some unpleasantness as we continue to advance here. So hopefully you're on high ground, and that's what A Course in Miracles is getting us to that higher ground where we can survive the turmoil and troubles that this world is always trying to throw at us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What we don't always see as we're living our lives is that the purpose of this world is to distract us from our truth. Now, that doesn't really seem like it, right? It usually seems like, oh yeah, well, I need to go do this thing, I need to go do that thing, I need to figure this out, I need to make my life work. And what we find over and over again is that maybe we can kind of cobble together a plan, and maybe it does work for a while, whether it's a month, a year, or a decade, or even a few. But at some point, things always head south. And the reason for that is this is a world of ups and downs again. This is the home of duplicity, of duality, and where heaven is a state of perfect love and peace, this world is the opposite, right? This world is a place of constant shift and change. This world is a world of impermanence. To use that kind of famous line about this world, nothing here ultimately lasts. Even the mountains, over time, they get worn away. Even the most permanent things like the sun, at some point is gonna, I think it's gonna supernova or something. It's gonna collapse, and maybe that's not for 13 million years or something, but it is going to happen. None of these things are perfect and eternal. And what the Course is pointing us towards is, well, why don't you actually hook your happiness, hook your identity to what is eternal and real? And in so doing, you're going to find an eternal happiness that is worthy of you, rather than these things that at some point are always going to fall apart.
And that is very true. And it's beautifully highlighted as far as, different sections throughout the Course as to what it is that we are electing to do. And that really is the core of all of our issues. One of my favorite parts of the Course in chapter 4, we have this discussion, it need not be, or this need not be. And it starts off, if you cannot hear the voice for God, it is because you do not choose to listen. And boy, that's pretty black and white. That's just bringing it down to that fatal level of reality. That you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behavior. Yet this is what you want. This is what you're fighting to keep and what you're vigilant to save. Your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and you do not seek the face of Christ. The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. How can it maintain the trick of its existence except with mirrors? But where you look to find yourself is up to you. So really, the Course doesn't give us any slack when it comes down to the truth of what we are electing to buy into. And if we're going to hang on to this vision of a world created by the ego, then the tides are going to continue to rise. It's going to get uglier and fierier and wetter, and because the ego is leading us like sheep to that cliff where we can become a lemming and plunge right over it. So, it's one of those things of how much do you feel that you can gain by holding on to the ego? And that's what everything reduces down to. That's the final foundation that we're building on.
Yeah, and what we're learning as we go forward with this is that ego's foundation is rickety. It's it's not well built. It's actually designed with cracks in it, and it will inevitably fail. And if we think about the idea of actually building a house or building a building of some sort, and this was the foundation that we started with, any sane project designer would say, don't build your house there. That is not a good idea. Your house is going to have a lot of problems. You're going to have to repair this constantly. There's never going to be any peace of mind if you try to build here. And that's basically the message we keep getting. Like, okay, look at what you've done. Look at this broken foundation that is always needing repairs. Why are you building here when, again, to kind of go back to your analogy, we can build on the high ground. We can build on the solid, firm foundation. It's not threatened by all of these, tides and rising seas. It's actually safe and secure, and there is no danger here. And it takes a lot of willingness for us to look at how much we have kind of built our happiness on the things of this world. And one of the things that can happen is we might even say, well, this thing seemed to work for me for a while. Whether this thing is a job, whether this thing is a relationship, whether this thing is some specific person or issue in the world. And so then we try to keep coming back to it. But what happens is, at some point, again, it just falters. It falls. And what he's counseling us to do here is to really find that peace within. If we can find the peace within, then we can be peaceful in the face of everything that happens. And we don't have to feel so threatened by changes in the world that will inevitably occur.
Yeah, that is so very true. As we continue further with this chapter, has a few high points here that it really puts a lot of emphasis on. It says, when you are sad, know this need not be. Depression comes from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. Remember that you are deprived of nothing except by your own decisions, and then decide otherwise. When you are anxious, realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego, and know this need not be. You can be as vigilant against the ego's dictates as you are for them. When you feel guilty, remember that the ego has indeed violated the laws of God, but you have not. Leave the sins of the ego to me. That is what atonement is for. But until you change your mind about those whom your ego has hurt, the atonement cannot release you. while you feel guilty, your ego is in command, because only the ego can experience guilt. And, you know, those three regions of human emotional range, depression, anxiety, and guilt, are the ones that are most immediate in our day-to-day experience. We go through those that trifecta throughout the day, and we never stop to realize this need not be. We can stop the torment. We can stop the feelings of shame and separation simply by looking deeply into what it is that we are doing. And of course, that's always going to bring us back to that idea of condemnation. If you are attacking and condemning those around you, then you're playing the ego's favorite game, and it is always going to result in your feeling miserable about yourself. So it is, you know, it's an easy fix, but because we are so addicted to the ego, it seems like something that, you know, is the size of Mount Everest that we're struggling with. The truth is, it's simply like, you know, the dropping the mic and walking off stage. That's all you have to do.
I like that. I like that. We're dropping the mic. It kind of reminds me of another analogy around this that I've heard from Regina Dawn Akers and her teachings. There's a idea that the ego is a little bit like being at the mouth of a cave, and we hear all this sort of noise coming back from us, back to us from the cave, and the ego's response is to shout at the noise. Now what happens? Well, we just sort of keep the echo going, right? We keep the noise circulating. It keeps coming back to us. And the way for us to actually find the silence in the cave is to stop shouting back at the ego and stop shouting back into the cave. And eventually that noise will die down and there will be a place of stillness. So this, in a way, is our practice. As we go through life, we can see how our life is shouting at us, how the circumstances in our life, the people in our life, sometimes seem to be unkind or unappreciative, or whatever it is that they're doing, and we want to shout back. And our encouragement here is, well, maybe it's better to stop shouting, right? Maybe it's better to drop that mic rather than to keep pumping more ego raucous noise into the situation. And it's usually not easy at first, right? Because our impulse is to react, our impulse is to blame, our impulse is to condemn. But we start to develop this new habit, and the new habit is a sense of watchfulness. It's a sense of patience. It's a sense of witnessing what's unfolding without getting caught up in it. And this idea of this need not be is so beautiful, right? We don't need to go into that reacting. We don't need to go into perpetuating this cycle. This next paragraph is really just a beautiful continuation of this message. Watch your mind for the temptations of the ego, and do not be deceived by it. It offers you nothing. When you have given up this voluntary dispiriting, you will see how your mind can focus and rise above fatigue and heal. Yet you are not sufficiently vigilant against the demands of the ego to disengage yourself. This need not be. So he's letting us know that we can get more dedicated, we can get more consistent. And it's definitely not always easy, as we're talking about, but it is available to us. And it's worth going for, right? This practice is a practice worth doing. Why? Because the payoff is happiness. The payoff is peace. The payoff is really a deep, profound knowing of the love of God. And with that within us as our experience, there's nothing that we can't face here in this world. There's nothing that would take that away unless we're actually willingly giving it up. And we get better and better at saying, this need not be.
Absolutely. It is a journey inward, which is taking you into infinity. That's another paradox, you know, where we are trapped in the realm of paradox as long as we're attached to the ego. Further down here, it says, I do not attack your ego. I do work with your higher mind, the home of the Holy Spirit, whether you are asleep or awake, just as your ego does with your lower mind, which is its home. I am your vigilance in this, because you are too confused to recognize your own hope. And I like that idea of not resisting the ego in the sense of, you know, putting up a fight. And when you find yourself in that space of overreacting to the ego, then you actually are reinforcing its effects. So we really have to be very alert to how we are responding to that inner dialogue that we're also listening to. And at some point, we have to be able to confront ourselves, but not in a place of attacking it, merely saying, you know, this need not be. I don't need to listen to this. This is not acceptable. It's creating a world that I don't want. And it's diminishing me to the point where I am becoming insignificant. So the whole point, I think, of what Jesus reinforces over and over again through the Course is that whenever you are in that defensive position, whenever you're taking a stand against something, you are entering into that realm of the Chinese finger puzzle. You know, you stick both ends in the tube, and when you try to pull them out, it responds by contracting around your fingers. So we really have to be willing to approach all of this with a sense of being at peace in life and just letting go.
Yeah. And again, it's simple, but not always easy, right? So that's why this is a spiritual practice. It's something that we just kind of keep doing, and we do it over and over and over. And eventually we start to get a little better at it. I remember, you know, thinking about this idea as this is like a lifelong spiritual practice. I heard Gary Renard talking about this idea, and he said in a workshop he was sharing that after 10 years of practicing forgiveness, he thought he was actually finally getting good at it. And after the workshop, this woman came up to him, and she was 70 years old, and she said, "If this takes 10 years, I'll be 80 years old." And you know, Gary's response was, "Well, if you don't practice this, how old will you be in 10 years?" And the point is, yeah, we might as well let the light come in, right? Because you know, we're going to be living this experience one way or another. We might as well have more happiness, more joy, less pain and suffering. That's really what this course is offering us, and I think it's a pretty beautiful gift that we're being given if we're willing to take it.
Oh, it definitely is. And we can finally arrive at that same altitude that Jesus was at, you know, again, over and over in the Course, as well as in the New Testament. He alludes to that. He reaffirms that. So we are not we are not striving to become perfect beings. We are already perfect beings. We've just deluded ourselves into accepting the smallness that we're always confronted with when we're aligned with the ego. It says, I raise the dead by knowing that life is an eternal attribute of everything that the living God created. Why do you believe it is harder for me to inspire the dispirited or to stabilize the unstable? I do not believe that there is an order of difficulty in miracles. You do. So, you know, we're the ones who are putting a damper on everything that's occurring here. And Jesus is very vigilant in forcing us to look at the way that we are approaching life. and to expand our acceptance of truth, and ultimately to walk the same path that he walked, which is to be able to, heal people who are in various states of infirmity, to transform conditions so that truth emerges out of disaster. I mean, we are on course for a noble outcome, and it is an outcome that is very dynamic because we are following the footsteps of the one man who came through the world and pretty much turned it upside down and said, no, this is not truth, this is not real.
Yeah, and it is a very high bar to be in this world without any suffering, to know that nothing here can take away our peace, even something as extreme as his crucifixion, which the Course teaches us, was a teaching of love because he didn't suffer. He didn't feel any pain as he was going through this experience. This is obviously where we get when we're at the end of the journey. And most of us are not quite there yet, but it is good to keep that as our goal and to remember that is where we're going and that is what we want, because freedom from fear is happiness, right? When we don't have fear, when we don't have guilt, when we don't have pain within us, all that we have left is our truth. And so we just keep coming back to this again and again. When the ego rears its ugly head, we can say, I've done that before. I've reacted around that before. And where did it get me? It got me more suffering, more pain, more trauma. Maybe I could do it differently this time. And even that little idea within our mind opens up new possibilities. And it starts to take us down new paths. And that's really what Jesus is asking us to do. He's saying, just look honestly at your life and the results of the decisions that you've made. And are you really happy with what has come of your decision-making process? If we're really honest, we can pretty much all say, no, this isn't the happiness I was hoping for. But the good news is that we can turn all of these decisions over to something else within us. And this is the Holy Spirit. This is our relationship with Jesus. And this is the path that leads us back to our awakening in God. So we're really cottoning on to the way that we want to go here. And we're starting to realize, when I choose that loving option, I feel better. I feel happier. And things have a way of working out okay. Maybe I could keep doing that more and more in my life and just see what happens.
Well, and to live in the expectation that, your life is going to be transformed, because if you follow the Course, then it will be. And that's, the best place to arrive at is happiness is definitely a wonderful experience, but to live in a state of peace and to know that peace that passeth understanding is always accessible to you, I think is really a glorious outcome and a great thing to aspire to, just to no longer be caught up in the turmoils and the troubles of the ego's world.
Yeah, and the ego is always happy to kind of bring us back down to its level, right? There's that saying, misery loves company. Well, the ego wants us to hang out with it for as long as we're willing. And in the beginning, we kind of think that that's the only choice, that we have to listen to the ego thought system. It's just how things are. But just like Bill said to Helen on that kind of fateful day before the scribing began, there's got to be another way. And she said to him, you're right, Bill. I don't know what that is, but I will help you find it. And that willingness to set aside separate interests and to pursue a common goal is really at the heart of A Course in Miracles. Because what it's asking us to do is to set aside our separate interests in our life and to open up to that common goal of remembering our truth. There's a great talk given by Ken Wapnick. It's entitled, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle," based on a very old saying, that quote. And And the hard battle that we're all fighting is the battle of believing our ego truth is our truth. It's not our truth, but when we buy into it, it comes with all kinds of layers of suffering and shame and misery. And in our own way, all of us are struggling with that. So when we can see that we're actually all in the same boat, no matter what our affiliations are, our country of origin, our political leanings, whatever we have around all of that, that underneath all of that, we're struggling with the same thing. And to realize that means that we can all start to wake up together, no matter where we're starting out from.
Very, very true. Well, it has been, as usual, a very engaging dialogue, and we all seem to end up kind of rejuvenating ourselves when we connect like this.
Yeah.
Got some activities coming up this weekend that look like they're going to be kind of fun. You want to share what's going on?
Yeah, I am co-leading an event called Playful Spirit Retreat. That's about being kind of playful and light, and also doing the healing work to move past our shadow pieces. It's a camping retreat a little bit north of Chicago at Illinois Beach State Park. You can reach me. You can find the details at my website, barrethadeen.com. You can reach out to me by phone to sign up. A couple weeks after that, Charlie and I are leading our next Good News, and it's going to be focused on the section in the course called the Two Pictures. So it's a really evocative and helpful section in the course that we're going to be diving into in much greater depth. And then a bit further down the road, in late August, I'm leading a retreat in Boulder, Colorado, called Clearing the Way for Spirit. It's a whole weekend dive into our truth and clearing out what's false and having a good time as well. So again, those details are at my website, barrethadeen.com, and all kinds of more good stuff coming up a bit farther down the road too. So keep your ears to the ground, and we'll keep sharing the good stuff.
Yes. Well, you guys have a great time out there in that perfect environment of sunlight, wind, water, sand, and the lovely temperatures.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. I can feel it really deep, and yeah. When any of us chooses healing, we're actually helping the whole choose healing because we're not separate. So the effects kind of actually ripple out and touch everyone. So I really like that idea, and it's sort of motivation to just really keep on going because what we all want is joy, and that's what I want too. So
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, this has been really a great talk with you as always, Chris, and I'm looking forward to talking with you next week and diving into more.
Yes. You have a great time. I'll be looking forward to stories of what happened on the beach. And we will reconvene in 7 days.
All right, sounds good, sir.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.